So yeah, what is MentorColor really? So MentorColor is a platform that we've built, and we're really focused on increasing the representation of Blacks and people of color in tech. So we believe that there's still a lot that needs to be done, some of which is giving Black people access to the wealth of experience that exists in general from people in the community that have had the experience and can kind of share that to those that are either getting started or looking for ways to advance in tech. So what we've done is that we've put together mentors from different countries and from different tech disciplines. A lot of our mentors work at top tech companies, and we pull them together on the MentalColor platform, where we give you access to them, so you can book mentors and work with them on different aspects of your growth in tech. Our mentors can help you when it comes with one-on-one group sessions. You can also have group mentorship sessions with them. This is kind of one of the sessions. This is kind of a loose one, but we have other sessions where it's mainly focused on specific topics around tech. You can get career advice from mentors. You can also get like code reviews or even like interview prep techniques that you can get from mentors working with them. And the mentors that we have on the platform are from across the entire stack. So you can find mentors that are more focused on like front end, back end, ML, data, and even products. We, like I said, host weekly group sessions, just like this one. So there's a few sessions that are upcoming. We encourage you to go check them out, and if there's anything that is of interest, make sure to RSVP for those. So that's about it. That's MentalColor in a nutshell. I'll get back now to why we're here. So like I said, we're celebrating Black History Month. Today's the last day of it. And we wanted to close this with a session where AJ, a good friend and colleague of mine, can kind of talk to us about his experience in tech, but also give you the chance to ask any questions that you have. So I think we'll just jump right into it. Like I said, if you feel comfortable, you'll be able to like ask your questions directly. Otherwise, feel free to drop them in the chat, and we'll make sure to take them. So to just get it started, I think AJ, maybe you can first and foremost introduce yourself, and then I know I have a couple of questions of my own, and then we can also open it up for others to ask questions.
Sure. Yeah, I am unmuted. Okay, great. I mess that up all the time. Hi, everybody. My name is Arjumon Bonhomme, but everyone calls me AJ. I am an engineering manager at Spotify currently. I've been in tech since, I guess 22 years now, since about 2000, in the middle of the first .com boom. I've mostly worked at small to medium-sized startups. Spotify is my first big company. I'm from the US. I'm a Southerner. Was raised in Louisiana and spent most of my adult life on the East Coast in DC and New York. I'm now living in Stockholm with my wife and one-year-old son. I got into tech in a somewhat unconventional route, but maybe we'll get into that in more detail in a bit. So looking forward to hearing from all of you, and happy to share anything about my journey or what I think it takes to sort of get started now in tech. So back to you, Victor.
Yeah, thanks for the intro. And I think you already touched upon it, like one of the first questions that I kind of had in mind. I myself am from a traditional CS background, but I've worked closely with you, and you have an unconventional track into tech, right? So You don't have a formal CS degree, and you've been able to accomplish a whole lot with that. So maybe you can just like walk us through how you even got into tech in the first place.
Sure. So yeah, totally non-conventional and to some degree by accident. So when I got into tech, at least as far as I understood at the time, or even sort of reflecting on it, there was no like formal sort of tech scene the way that there is now. So like everybody and their mother and kids and everyone knows, oh man, you could get rich in tech. Oh, you could make an app. You could, make a this, make a that. Like tech is like a known career path. I graduated high school in '96. And at that point, the internet was like a new-ish thing. Like most people didn't have it at home, so like, yeah, tech was still new. I mean, it's old and people made microchips and COBOL programs and mainframes and whatever forever ago. But my journey was a happy accident. So the only like education, like formal education I have in tech was an intro to programming class in high school, where I learned how to do QBasic. And my teacher, Mr. Ryland, he was an unconventional kind of guy. If you seem to have any sort of natural aptitude, he didn't help you. He was like, well, why don't you go look it up? Just figure it out yourself. If you didn't have any aptitude, then he was happy to help you or whatever. I happened to show some aptitude for it, and he basically gave me no help and told me, go look it up, read the manual, yada, yada. So that's the only formal education I have. The way that I actually got started in tech, let me see if I can make this condensed. I was trying to build my own website, just for shits and giggles. And no, that's starting too far back. Where do I want to start? I taught myself how to program by reading books from Barnes and Noble's, Borders, bookstores. This is before there were like tutorials on the internet or YouTube or anything like that, just because it was interesting, like a hobby kind of stuff. And I ended up spending so much time doing that. I was in college at the time. I was like a biology major, pre-med, that kind of thing. I spent so much time doing my hobby that like I basically essentially flunked out. I lost my scholarship. I was tired of school anyway, and I was like, well, screw it. I'm going to try to like do tech full time. So a buddy of mine from school and we started like an IT consulting firm, and like we built websites for people. We like built computers for people. We trained people on how to use like Office products. We ran network cable. We did anything that you could possibly think of in tech. This is like 1998 or so. And my first full-time tech job was for two alumni from Howard University, who were trying to start a government to consumer platform for the internet. Like they were letting people pay tickets online and fill out forms and everything. They were bootstrapped themselves, and it was their startup, and they lasted like all of 3 months. And I was working for them. They ran out of cash. I was their only employee, and then I got my first job at a legitimate startup. But all of my learning was essentially books and hobbyist kind of stuff. That was really sort of meandering and a long way of answering your question, Victor. Sorry about that.
Yeah, but that's totally fine. I mean, like it's interesting, right? Like there was no YouTube and you had to like read from books and whatnot, which is not very conventional these days, because you can just go online and you find everything you need, right?
Yeah, no, it was truly like my passion. Like I loved it. I breathed it. If anyone's familiar with Malcolm Gladwell and the concept of like putting 10,000 hours into something for mastery. I didn't know anything about that at the time, but that is what I was doing. I was just spending every waking moment like coding my face off, like just pet projects here and there. The very first thing I was paid to do was Visual Basic CGI to build a website. Somebody at Howard knew somebody else who had like their own consulting company. The job was too big for this guy to do it himself. And he was like, "Oh, you know Visual Basic?" I was like, "Yeah." He was like, "All right, well, you're going to help me, build this e-commerce site for a rare book company that's in New York. Like they sell like, I don't know, first edition like Bibles or something like that, like really old stuff." And I did Visual Basic CGI to like make an e-commerce site. That was my very first paid gig, but all of it was hands-on books. And I was fortunate enough, my first like real deal startup tech job was at a cyber intelligence company, and I got the gig doing what would right now be called like full stack development. So I was doing server-side JavaScript in active server pages, and I got the job by answering a question the way the interviewer had never seen before. It was like how to make like bar charts with HTML or something like that, but do it vertically or something like that. And I gave him an answer that like made sense, and he hadn't heard of it before. And he was like, "Oh, wow," and I can get into how his boss wouldn't have hired me based on my background, something I found out 6 months later, if the questions go that direction. Very unconventional, but it was all passion. It was all something that I loved doing. So I would have been doing it even if I wasn't getting paid, I guess I was at first. And eventually, I got my first gig.
Yeah, super interesting. And I think there was this other stuff that I was kind of wondering, because I know that you have been working quite a lot on the infrastructure side of software engineering, which is also not very common. Like most people actually work on products. So like, how did you like find yourself in that part of software engineering?
Sure. So I was very fortunate with my first legitimate gig in tech. I was there for like 8 years. Like I said, it was this cyber intelligence company, but it was a place that ran fleets of servers before there were like Docker containers and all of that. Like this place was like a miniature Google. So we ran web crawlers that crawled the entire internet like once a month. And that was like, we worked with domain registrars and got the list of all possible domains and wrote web crawlers to crawl all that. We crawled like chat, IRC, email honeypots, like all types of stuff. Internet intelligence was a thing. But at this place, we ran all of the infrastructure ourselves. So everything that we wrote, we ran. And this is like back in 2000. And that's kind of before the notion of like, you build it, you run it, ops and squads was like a thing, before DevOps was a thing. Like, this is something that we did. And I was at this company for 8 years. It was like, I don't know, foundational. So like, I was learning the program and I was doing all of this sort of typical sort of engineering work, but at the same time, I'm operating, fleets of servers, and not huge in Spotify terms, like not thousands of servers, but like there are 70 nodes running this web crawler. There are 30 nodes running this like scoring engine. So I was doing like ops work at the time, which gave me a taste of kind of like infrastructure-esque work. And then the next time that I was doing something that sort of SRE-like or operational was at Hinge. So that was probably like my third or fourth gig by that time. I was the first engineer there, and I had to run everything that was Hinge. So build it, run it, and like, I really had to run it because it was a consumer-facing app. And like, if it was down, then people noticed, and you couldn't have, "Oh yeah, we're down for the weekend to do some maintenance." No, like it needed to be up and yada yada. So so there was that. And then I got into infrastructure at Spotify because once I really was working on software that people were using every minute of every day, a consumer facing app at Hinge, the rush from that, like, wow, yeah, like if I, do this deploy and it goes wrong and, it blows up and no one can use the app, whoa, that was like a huge rush for me. And over time, my interest in I don't want to say my interest in the product side waned, but like getting things right at an API level, at an infrastructure level, is more objectively right or accurate than it is on like the product side, where there's like subjectivity and like what's good, what looks nice, what works well. Like on the infrastructure side, it was a lot more black and white. So that's kind of what drew me to it. My I guess movement into it kind of started with that first gig where we were operating all of the systems ourselves, sort of hardened or really realized that I had a passion for that in running something that was real time, that people use day in and day out at Hinge, and then the opportunity to do the same thing at Spotify on the infrastructure side.
Yeah. It sounds like you're super excited about like infra related things in general.
It's pretty cool, man. Knowing that like we're keeping systems up so like my team runs the perimeter infrastructure for Spotify. And what that means is like every request that Spotify gets goes through our systems before it makes it to whatever backend service actually delivers what you need. So like if you do a search, it goes through our systems and then it goes to the search service. If you like look up some album art or something like that, it goes through our stuff and then it goes to the albums. If you like playlist, everything goes through like our systems and then to the actual systems. That level of responsibility is like, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. And I can imagine like with that level of responsibility, like you could also be responsible for when the Spotify app goes down, which is also interesting.
Yeah. No, if you're reading in the news about Spotify being down or like your Spotify isn't working, it's not necessarily that my team did something, but my team is probably looking into it if we didn't do it. So like, sometimes we push out a change, it's like, oh yeah, we broke it. Other times it's sort of like, oh yep, yeah, there's a region down in Google, or oh, there's a DNS issue, or any number of things. But if Spotify appears to be down, my team is probably involved in figuring out either how to get us back up or how we went down in the first place, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Nice. So I mean, I could keep asking questions, but I need to open up the floor now to everyone. So if you have any questions, I think now is the time. You can just use the raise hand feature, and that way we can just like try to get through as many questions as possible. Also, if you're not comfortable speaking, you can always drop your questions in the chat and we'll take that too. Yes, we already have. So Richard, yeah, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. How's everyone doing? My first question is, what obstacles did you face in tech as a Black man? I'm gonna just go straight for the jugular because I know that's a touchy subject, and it's definitely a touchy subject. But I just wanted to start there, if you don't mind.
Sure. If I'm being honest, for me, my journey in tech as a Black man has actually been relatively charmed. The number of assholes, bigots, etc., that I've run into has been who have the ability or the opportunity to impact my trajectory has been relatively low. The only time that I know for sure that like my background, my Blackness really kind of was at issue was in that first job. And I sort of alluded to this in my intro. So the guy that hired me, he came from a non-traditional background as well. He was a PhD chemist. who had been promoted in like the military intelligence or something like that, and eventually stopped doing chemistry and was managing and like hated it and was like, oh, I'm going to do something else. So then he went and figured out how to like code, and he got into tech that way. But he did have a PhD in something else. He's the one that hired me. This is back during the dot-com boom. So like there's pet stock. Everything was like a viable like internet business or whatever. Not really, but that was the thinking at the time. So this company that hired me, they were hiring people in like cohorts, in waves. So like 20 people would start on one given day. And in my cohort, we went around the room and we introduced ourselves and said, oh, this is what I'm going to be doing. This is my background, yada, yada. My manager was in the same cohort. So they hired a new director of engineering at the same time that I got hired. And I introduced myself, and I probably said, oh, I went to Howard University for biology, and, this is my first job, in tech and whatever. I don't remember what I said, but I, certainly didn't say, oh, I have all this experience. I have a CS degree, none of that. At my 6-month or 1 year review, it's probably 6 months because I started in the middle of the year. I got a pretty decent raise, and he's, walking through it with me. And he was like, I've been really impressed. I think you've done great work, and he was giving me these compliments or whatever. And he was like, and something along the lines, I was really surprised, or I was really impressed because he didn't say I didn't expect much. He was trying to be nice. But he basically said that, we were sitting in the onboarding session, and I'm like, who is this guy? He has no experience, no degree. Like, what are we going to do with him? And it turns out that I, started, and like I showed out, like I kicked ass. There were waves and waves of layoffs. Not long after I got hired. And I ended up being one of the most tenured people at the company after 8 years. So he was really, really impressed, but he basically let me know in a sort of offhand kind of way, know that he wouldn't have hired me if he had been hired, in the cohort prior. But other than that, I personally haven't really felt much in the way of discrimination or like hurdles or barriers placed my way. That doesn't mean that there aren't some that have occurred that maybe I didn't notice. Now, I have seen it happen to other people. You guys probably are familiar with this. There aren't that many of us in any sort of given company. It's not uncommon to be the only Black person in your team or your company or what have you. Spotify is the first time that I've worked with more than like 2 or 3. So my journey, while individually charmed and pretty chill, has been sort of, for the most part, littered with otherness, because there haven't been other Black people, that look like me in tech or in the company in general. And then since being at Spotify, my journey has been trying to make the company, tech, et cetera, as hospitable for the other Black people in tech as possible. So, there's now a BLK engineering channel that I started up in 2018 to find out how many of us there were. I think at the time there were like 12. Now we're like 90. It's pretty dope. So overall, my journey has been pretty easy, but I think that is atypical when listening to my many peers, both at Spotify and the people that I've sort of met throughout along the way. Long-winded answer to say it's been fine, but I know it hasn't been fine for everybody else, and that is something that I try to work on and get back and help others because I know it's not necessarily easy.
AJ, thank you for that. It was some good pointers, and the point I was really trying to touch to was the inclusion point of it. Like, as you said, in a tech company, there might be a few of us, and I've been on tech interviews and, company meets and stuff, and you look around and it's kind of like, you're the pepper grain in the salt field kind of thing. And, it's like nothing wrong with that in the sense of like, we're all people, but in the sense of more inclusion, like I know for a fact as you said again, that there's a lot of us black people that are in the tech field that definitely deserve a seat at the table or to make our own table, but that's a journey and conversation that will keep going on.
Yeah, definitely agree with you, Richard. Michael.
Hey, greetings. And I like to. Is there echo?
Yeah, there's a bit of it.
Is there echo now?
Oh, it's good. It's
Less.
good. Yeah,
it's all right.
Let me move away from my computer. All right. How about now?
Perfect.
yeah, it's all good. Yeah.
All right, great. So, quick introduction. I'm a lead software developer at PwC. I came in. I didn't have a CS degree. I'm proud to say it, and I just want to let you know that no matter your background, I believe I'll take guys. I'll take people like ladies too. I didn't mean, but I'll take anyone who hasn't had a CS degree over a CS degree because I know that they've been able to do projects by themselves. Or like projects are really hard to do if you haven't noticed, right? Getting any application to work. Say if it's like your React TikTok application, right? If you could connect the front end and back end together, right? As a self-taught developer, right? That just shows that you can really succeed to meet in any organization. So guys, be proud of it, right? So I really want to point that out, especially, us black people and people who struggle, definitely be proud of it. Because, if I were the head of a company, I would definitely hire you. It would be full of us. But my question here is that, like the host, I've been doing really, really well at my company, so much so, right? 2 months later, I came in as an entry-level contractor. 2 months later, I'm the lead front-end dev, right? So much so that, if I were to leave today, that company would fall apart, the project, like bad things would happen if I leave. So with that, I really want to consider another raise. So how should I go about it asking for another raise? Like what are the ranges and values you expect for a person like me? Even though you don't know me too much, do know that this PwC is a very large company, right? If anyone doesn't know, they're the big four. They do the taxes for Google, Spotify, and all these big tech companies. So if I were to leave, so I'm just wondering what should my value? I definitely want my raise and your advice on, what's that number that I should ask for as of right now, and then when I become a full employee.
I can't give you any advice on what the number is. I've been in Sweden for almost 4 years now, so I'm totally detached from salaries in the US. So I couldn't speak to what would be a good number. But I think the approach that I would give to sort of negotiating a number, whatever that number is, would be to first, whatever number you're thinking of, I would probably start higher than that number just off top. Like whatever number pops into your head, well, do whatever research you need to make sure that you're not being, completely absurd. But don't worry too much about asking for too much.
Right.
You have gotten to the point where a company wants to make you an offer, or you're already employed by a company, unless it's a really small firm where egos really, really sort of weigh in more heavily. Ask for what you want. They've spent the time in vetting you and getting to the point where they want to hire you. You asking for more than whatever is in that range is not going to make them say, oh, you know what, never mind. Unless, like I said, it's like a really small firm where, the founder is going to personally be offended. And even then, if the person would reject you or rescind their interest in you as a result of that, it's probably not the type of place you want to work in the first place. So ask for more than what comes to mind. Don't worry too much about asking for too much. That's sort of the simple answer for or my thoughts on getting in and asking for more, or getting in and setting that sort of initial number. If you wanted advice on how to increase your salary while you're already there. For that, my thought would be to talk with whoever you're reporting to and let them know what you want to make. So, I make 100,000 a year right now. And you know what, boss, I want to make 125. What do I need to do? What do you need to see in order for me to make 125? Ask the question. And push them to be specific. And once you guys sort of get through that, make sure you document it and say, okay, hey, all right, so you think that I need to do these 6 things, or I need to get, show this level of impact or whatever. Try to understand from them what they think you need to do in order to warrant getting paid that much. And then check in with them, at least monthly on how you're doing against achieving those things. Many people start, talking about what they want to make, a month or 2 or 3 months before like raise time happens. Nah, that's not how you do it. You start, like when you get your last raise that you weren't happy with, you start a year ahead and say, okay, in a year from now, when, it's compensation time again, here's what I need to be able to show that I've done in order to, warrant getting the number that I want. So, start with the manager and say, hey, this is the number that I want. What do I need to do to get that? And then go back and forth with them.
Today is the Semla Day in Sweden.
What's that?
Yeah.
I felt like there was one we did.
Okay. Yeah. So that's my thoughts on that.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. Listen, hey, I'm out in NYC. In the Facebook meetup groups that I heard about it. I'm posting. I'm trying to do in-person meetup groups every single day from 6 to 7 Zoom meetings. Help out, do more sessions like these, as well as in-person as well as virtual meetups. Virtual meetups every day as well as in-person meetups in NYC. So thanks for the answer, and I'll love to connect with you all. So we could get to that right number. Appreciate it.
Nice. I think we have a few others right now in the chat. So we have one from Anthony, and Anthony's asking, if you would start over now to get into tech, where would you focus your learning as a self-taught developer?
If I were to start over now, man, the game has changed so much. I think my impression is that the easiest way to get in right now is with web-based development. So I think I would start with a boot camp or a series of online classes around web development. But my understanding is that the money right now is in ML, and how to get started on the ML side, I'm not entirely sure because it's heavily sort of math based. I'm gonna, pitch that over to Victor. He's got more experience there. I'm the infrastructure, guy, less on the data science ML side. But if you want the cash, chase ML. How to get started in that? I'm sure there are tons of courses and everything that you could do online. But my impression is sort of heavily math based. I'll let Victor talk to that part. I would start getting into the web based development. And before I pitch it off to Victor, I think one thing that isn't any different between now and when I started is getting hands-on experience. The more you're building things, the more that you're actually doing the work, the better you get at it, the more that you're able to speak to the type of problems that you're actually going to face on the job. So whether it's web development, backend development, ML, whatever, the more projects, the more work that you're actually doing, and not just like tutorials, like the more things that you build that do something, even if it's not, going to run forever, or even if it's just an experiment that you're doing, the more time that you're putting in, the more reps that you're doing, like if this were like the gym or working out, the better at it you're going to get, the more likely you're going to come across the type of things that people are doing day to day in the role that you'll be applying for, and the better prepared you'll be.
Yeah, I don't know if I should steal the scene here to add to what you said, but I can just drop a bit there. So I think I do agree with AJ in terms of like when you get into, I think for me, just focusing on programming, like that's the fundamental skill. It's like if you can code in a specific language, you can do front end, you can do back end. Now, you can also do like data science, like more on the analytics side of things, and you can potentially do data engineering. So I would say like just taking one language, being good at doing that, that kind of opens up the door for you. Now, how can you go from having like a specific language that you are kind of okay with programming in to actually building a portfolio? I think this is where like, I think front end is always like a faster way to get things started. It's more visual and more engaging so that you kind of see where you're headed, and it helps you stay motivated. I like backend, but I feel like it's just so plain. You don't really see so much, and it's very difficult for you to kind of see what you're doing. So it might not be the easiest path to go down, but if for some reason you have like interest in that, that's also a place to go to. And then when it comes to ML, which obviously it's pretty high paid, and there's not a lot of people in the field. The way that I know that ML does require some like some theoretical aspects that are not necessarily required for other software engineering jobs. And that is something that's super important. So what I would say is like, depending on your previous background, so people that are coming from like, say financial background or maybe like statistics or something like that, it's going to be a lot easier to already have some of the bits of ML that will help you like take on some online courses and then eventually get into doing ML. But I've also seen other people that have just started programming. Maybe you started programming with Python and then now you're trying to like move towards doing ML. You could actually do it because there's a lot of courses online that allows you to manipulate data and kind of build models. Because like when you think about ML, you think that the modeling part of it is the biggest part. It's not really. There's a lot of libraries that you can use to write, to like build a model, and you can always throw things out. The most important part is knowing how to manipulate the data. And that's also something that you can do when you kind of, for example, Python is it's heavily used. So if you work with Python, you can get into it, and you just need to, it's kind of like a mindset shift. It's not about building APIs, but it's about focusing on data, cleaning it, understanding what the data says. So I would say that it's possible. It's going to be a lot easier if you had like a prior background in something more tied to like statistics or mathematics or something like that. But if you don't have that, you can still go down the Python route. And I think that that's going to be like a faster way for you to be able to actually work with some ML related things. And I know a few courses that I always recommend to people that want to get into ML, like doing the course on Coursera by Andrew Ng is always a great place to start. I don't remember the name of the course because I saw it years ago, but it's the best place to start if you want to understand what ML is. And I could just like look it up and drop it in the chat also. Cool. So I'll just move on to the next one. This one is from Kevin. So at what point does experience trump lacking a degree? And have you noticed any impact being a person of color and lacking a degree in job opportunities for yourself or peers?
At what point does experience trump lacking a degree? I would say after your very first set of experience, after your first job. I think your experience is ultimately going to be more impactful than where you went to school or what you went to school for, unless maybe it's something like ML or data science, where you've done some of the theory. I'm a hiring manager, and I have been for like 8 years or something like that. And I don't think I've ever heard anyone say, oh, well, this person doesn't have a degree or they don't have any formal education or anything like that. The only time I've really come across that, like I said, my experience has been relatively charmed, to be frank, was the manager that I had at my first job. So if you have experience, then I think that begins to trump any sort of degree sort of basically right away. Now, initially, if you don't have any experience and you're really trying to get your first job in tech, then the more that you can point to projects that you've done so that people see or can get an understanding of what type of work you've done, even if it's just been, in your own sort of free time, the better off you'll be. I think education is most important when you're first starting out. In terms of landing a gig when you're first starting out, as a filtering function, so it's very common, to, as a hiring manager, like, I don't read your entire resume, and most of the managers that I know don't either. Like, we're busy and we're sort of looking over it and we're looking for things to catch our attention, right? So like, if you went, and I'm even guilty of this, if you went to Stanford versus, Alameda Community College, I'm going to notice Stanford and be like, okay, well, you got vetted into Stanford. Stanford thought that you were good enough. So I'm going to pay a little bit more attention. Doesn't mean I'm going to write you off because you went to Alameda Community College. It's just something that I'm going to notice. So I think education, in terms of landing that first gig, is most important when you're first starting out, but after that, less so. To the second part of the question, have I noticed any impact being a person of color and the way it's impacted my opportunities? I'd say not really. Like I said, I've had an atypical experience. I have not worked with many assholes in a sense where they could impact my trajectory, but I know that it has happened to other people. So for me, it's been pretty straightforward. One last thing, since we've been talking about this whole notion of education, I'd say that I went probably 14 years in the industry before I saw a point where formal education in CS really would have helped me. Now, fortunately, when that happened, this was actually at Hinge, I had hired a number of other people who had degrees, who had master's degrees, et cetera, and where it sort of like worked out was their experience of familiarity with concepts that were foreign to me. I wasn't familiar with them, but I understood them right away. So we had a graph problem at Hinge, where we had this graph of all your friends, and we're trying to find you the best dates by crawling the social graph or whatever. And as our network got bigger and bigger, crawling the graph took longer and longer. And one of them used basically statistics to improve the crawl time. So like, we were crawling their entire graph, so like and out 3 degrees. So like, we started with you and we crawled everyone that you're connected to 3 degrees out. And for most people, that was like hundreds of thousands of nodes. But because it's a graph, there might have been multiple ways to reach, this person that's in your 3rd degree network. Like, you could have got through your friend Andy or through your friend Jim, right? You could have gotten to the same place by any one of those paths. They use statistics to say, okay, what percentage of your 3rd degree network can we get to through only crawling, 90% of your 2nd degree connections. So they found and I understood it right away, and I'm not going to go through it in great detail here, but they use statistics to say, okay, we don't have to crawl the whole thing. If we crawl 95% of your network, we're going to reach, nearly 100%. 95% of your 2nd degree network will reach 100% of your 3rd degree network. So they did a randomizer and, took the whole 2nd degree network and chose 95 out of the 100 people that were in it, and it sped things up like incredibly. Those kind of moments were the ones where I'm like, oh man, if I had some CS training, maybe I would have covered this. But overall, most of the time we weren't doing things like that throughout my entire career. So yeah, we can move on to the next question, Victor.
Yeah, that's true. Like it's the same as like data structures and algorithms. Like you never tend to use a lot of those things, but it's always like knowledge that could be useful one time somewhere in some specific scenario. So it's not anything that's going to block you from moving forward. And it's like there's also a team, right? So it's yeah, you can always get people with different backgrounds complementing. So I'll go to the next one. This one is from Kevin, and Kevin is asking, how has the Black experience been working at Spotify and also living in Sweden? I mean, Sweden is quite a homogeneous white country, right? So we know that.
Yeah.
So how has it been for you?
Spotify has been incredible because I've never worked with so many Black people. I think part of that is because it's a big company. It's the biggest company I've ever worked for. I think we're like 7,000 people now. I think we were 2,500 when I joined. Prior to that, the biggest company I had worked for was like 150 people. And Spotify is in music, and Black folks essentially run music, or we're a big part of it. We set the culture. So there's an enormous number of Black people here, which makes me feel way less other. And there are 43. So there were people much younger than me at the company, and they were being their completely authentic selves. And that gave me the confidence and space to be my complete authentic self. Prior to that, I was me, but you didn't get all of me. You know, so that's Spotify. It's been great. As far as in Sweden, this is probably going to surprise many of you. Being a Black person in Sweden, being an American Black person in Sweden, for me, has been so much better than being a Black person in the US. In Sweden, I'm sure there is racism. They look at immigrants, you know, a certain kind of way or whatever, but I'm American, so I'm benefiting from privilege. But there is no history of like segregating Black folks, or like there is no like racial trauma history in Sweden the way there is in the US. So the two examples that I always give happened in my first year in Sweden. If you're Black in the US, probably anywhere, your mother, you know, as you were growing up, probably told you, hey, you know, if you're in a store, keep your hands to yourself, don't touch anything, you know, don't put anything in your bag or anything like that. Like, people think you're trying to steal, right? So I had that lesson growing up. Even as a grown-ass man, you know, I'm walking around wherever store I'm shopping in. If I'm coming from work or I've got a bag and I'm like maybe trying on some clothes or something, I'm very like exaggerative with my movements with the bag, very deliberate, like, hey, I'm putting my bag down outside the thing, you know, hey, I'm being a good customer, I'm not stealing. Like I'm telegraphing my movements in a way that's subconscious, right? To make it clear, hey, I'm a good customer, I'm not doing anything wrong, right? And I did that same sort of act here in Sweden. But like I said, it was all sort of subconscious. It's just what I do naturally. And I was doing it here in Sweden. And whatever signals I was getting in the US that was like, hey, Black guy, thank you for not stealing, I wasn't getting those signals here. I was being ignored. And it was so weird, you know, and it just happened over and over again that I was able to like stop doing that. You know, so like here, you know, I'm a foreigner because I don't speak Swedish, but I thought I'd get here and that people would speak English to me right away, because everyone in at least Stockholm speaks like incredible English. They understand like cultural jokes and like it's pop culture. It's wild. Like, you don't need to know any Swedish if you come here. You get along perfectly fine. I expected everyone to speak to me in English, like, oh, there goes a Black guy, he's clearly like not Swedish or whatever. Everyone speaks to me in Swedish until it's wild. So like, it has been a very pleasant sort of relief. It's sort of like, you know, walking around with a racial trauma backpack in the US, you know, that you didn't know that you were wearing, and then you get over here and it's sort of like, oh shit, I could take that off. That doesn't feel bad. I've got another anecdote, but we're running short on time. We can move on. It's been great. It's not to say that it's without problems. I know Afro Swedes who don't have my experience. I know people who have moved here who, this is going to sound fucked up, but they're more visibly African, who've had like fucked up experiences. You know, they got here and they, you know, were talking to someone and said, hey, you know, can you help me, you know, translate this thing? It was like, hey, are you American or are you African? Before they help this person whatsoever, because they, you know, yeah. So my experience again has been charmed and chill, but it's not necessarily great for everyone. It's way better than you think if you were to come from the US, though.
Yeah, that's it's a good one. That whole conversation can last for hours. So
Oh yeah,
let's
for
just
sure.
leave that for another time. So so the other one from Priscilla is what is your work-life balance like at Spotify compared to some of your prior companies?
Work-life balance at Spotify is chill as fuck. Like I get stressed because like I'm a workaholic and I want to do a great job. But people here clock out when they need to clock out. They take off when they need to take off. I'm coming from Hinge and I was the first engineer there, you know, so like I'd say for probably like the first 4 or 5 months at Hinge, I average probably 2 or 3 hours of sleep a night. And for the first 2 years, I took no vacation basically whatsoever. The first vacation that I took was for my honeymoon. So like, and I only did startups before. So like me coming in and showing up every day was like way more important. Here, if you're gone for a week, your team's going to notice, but Spotify is going to keep going. So yeah, work-life balance, super chill, both in the US and here at Stockholm. Stockholm, even way more chill. Whoa.
Yeah, that's I can definitely agree with that one. I think we have one more also just before we wrap up. This one is a long one. I'm gonna try to kind of summarize it. So so Tomika is saying like I'm coming from a non-tech project management position, and I have 6 years of software engineering experience that's been integrated into the role. So it's such a small company as far as staff count, and I'm having a hard time determining which level is appropriate for me to transition to as a full-time software engineer from a project manager. Yeah, this is this is a long one, but did you get it, AJ?
Yeah, I'm looking at it in the chat. So Tamika, can you maybe pipe in either in the chat or verbally just a confirmation you were a software engineer for 6 years as well as the project management position? Is that right? Don't see an answer. I'm going to assume that that's what you mean there. If you've been a software engineer for 6 years, okay, so you've got 6 years of software engineering experience, plus you've done project management. As long as your software engineering skills aren't rusty, I would be looking at you for some type of senior level engineer. Like 6 years of software engineering is enough to like get senior engineer on its own. But if you've done project management, you're doing something that I think escapes many engineers. Like my experience is that many engineers are like focused on the tech and like, oh, this is what is technically correct, or this is like what's most performant, or, you know, they're focused on like not the business value, not like what's ultimately important. They're focused on just the engineering. If you've got project management skills as well, then you should seemingly be able to like lead like another group of engineers. You may not be the, you know, most technical and be able to like say, okay, this is exactly how we need to implement the thing. But I would probably trust the project manager to like deliver the overall work stream ahead of like the most technical person. I'd want the most technical person there making technical decisions, but the project manager is going to be the person that knows, okay, yep, you know what? We said this was going to take us 2 weeks and it's taken us 3. I need to escalate and, let the manager know that it's going to be late, or I need to talk to the, stakeholders and say, hey, can we, cut some scope, and thinking about the overall, what needs to be delivered more than just sort of like the nuts and bolts of the tech.
Yeah, thanks, AJ. I'm just looking at the time and we're right on time. I think we can keep going, and probably we should have another session like this in the future. So we should talk about that offline. So I just want to say thanks to everyone for joining. And I encourage you to go book AJ on MentorColor if you want to have more of a one-on-one session with him. Otherwise, feel free to check out other mentors on the platform. I myself and some others are mentors there. I know Esco is also on this call, and he's also a mentor on MentalColor. So feel free to check it out. So we're building this community for you. Please take advantage of it. Also, we have other group sessions. Check them out, and feel free to RSVP to those also. So thanks a lot, everyone. And yeah, have a nice rest of the day.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, have a good day. Again, AJ, thanks for the